Right, so today I wanted to talk about a couple interesting stories regarding oil and gas, climate change, all that kind of stuff. Um, this is from Jason Kenney. President Biden vetoed a pipeline that would ship 830,000 barrels of oil a day from to the U.S. from Canada, but he is now urging OPEC dictatorships and Putin's Russia to increase oil production and shipments to the U.S. Um, a very peculiar approach to energy and global security. So I think what Jason Kenney is referring to, or at least partially referring to, is this story out of the BBC here. Nord Stream 2, Biden waves U.S. sanctions on Russian pipelines. So Russia is building, I mean, I think they're already almost done, this pipeline from Russia to Germany, I believe. And Biden is fully supportive of it, right? They're AOC is not up in arms. None of these climate zealots are up in arms about it, but this is the same guy who vetoed a pipeline from Canada to the States. And not to mention, too, this is climate crazy Canada, right? That has never ending regulations. Russia, not exactly sure how many regulations they have when it comes to this kind of stuff, but I pretty much guarantee you their regulations and their environmental standards are not as high as somewhere like Canada or the States are. So if it's okay for Russia to build a pipeline, but not the States, or sorry, if it's okay for Russia but not Canada to the States, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Now, here's the reality behind this stuff. Obviously, it makes absolutely no sense, but here's the reality. The reality is that these people that claim to be worried about climate change are zealots, right? They're complete zealots, especially the people at the top. The everyday environmentalist, they're just useful idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. They're useful idiots, right? They drive a Prius because they think it's good for the environment. When meanwhile, for every Prius that they for every they downgrade from an SUV to a Prius. Meanwhile, China's building coal-fired power plants left, right, and center. Oh, China's building renewables too. Well, yeah, they're also doubling down on coal and other non-renewable forms. And if you look at China, their percentage of energy that's or their energy output from non-renewable sources, it's still going up over time. None of these stupid environmental, the Paris or any of these stupid agreements, none of them have done anything, right? So again, Canada accounts for less than, I don't know what the exact number is, but my guess is that it's less than 1% of the world's emissions. Why in the world do we give a you know what about any restrictions when it comes anything aside from like obvious stupidity like intentionally polluting and whatnot? But why do we have a carbon tax when we know China's going to keep increasing their output no matter what we do? I mean, we could try and do something. So why are we doing it? Now people say, "Oh, we gotta, be the change you want to be." Well, that's not working. Right? These some of these climate agreements have been in place for decades. It's done nothing. It's done absolutely and utterly nothing. Like, how naive and stupid can you possibly be? So, again, I brought up a million times, but these people do not care about climate change. They are hypocrites. And not to mention, too, there isn't even any data that shows that climate change is a significant issue in the first place. And people say, oh, 97% of scientists agree, blah, 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 blah. No, they don't. Right? No, they don't. That was an incredibly biased. I don't even know. It was kind of a survey, to be quite honest. But to be included in that survey, you first had to answer yes to a handful of questions that essentially were already, do you agree with our point of view? So, of course, you're going to get the vast majority of people to agree with you. But here's the other thing. Um, if you're a climate scientist, you have a very clear incentive to act like climate change is this massive issue because anyone who understands how these fields work should understand, and probably would understand if you didn't understand it, is that half the job of being a researcher is getting funding, right? How do you guarantee you're going to get funding in the future? Well, how you guarantee you're going to get funding in the future is constantly act like it's a bigger and bigger issue, constantly put out research claiming it's a bigger and bigger issue. And again, another thing too people don't seem to want to talk about is that the vast majority of scientific studies, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it is an alarmingly high percentage, cannot be replicated, meaning they're meaningless, right? So this is the thing when it comes to this climate change stuff, is that what these people say is rather irrelevant. And I mean, there's other things they flat out lie about too. Is that the whole CO2 thing they lie about, because a lot of these people, most of them, they seem to think that CO2 is this dial that, if you increase CO2, it means you're going to increase temperature, you're going to increase, tornadoes and hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not true, right? So if you look at the hottest times, some of them were recently, but typically they were recorded, a long time ago. I believe the hottest year on record in the States, at least, it was in the 1930s, right? We're talking 90 years ago almost, right? CO2 was a lot lower back then. If you look at the years with the worst hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, they were all a long time ago. CO2 was a lot lower. So this is one thing that definitively is a lie that they like to preach, is CO2 is so terrible for the environment, right? And how they get away with it is that, if you go back, well, you have to start the graph at a convenient point in time. That's one thing I would stress. But if you look at over the last 150, 200 years, yeah, the ocean levels are rising and the temperature is going up. And they, CO2 is going up in that point in time as well. So they just assume that there's a correlation there. But they don't actually prove there's a correlation there. The other thing, too, when it comes to the ocean levels is that ocean levels have been rising at a consistent rate over that period of time. But if you look at, emissions outputs, they haven't been going up at that same consistent rate either. So there's not really a correlation there either, right? So this is the problem when it comes to the whole climate change thing, is that, I don't have time to go too in depth into this stuff, but at the end of the day, there's no real data that humans are causing climate change, right? But again, getting back to the main point here, if climate change is such a big issue, why are they supporting Russian pipelines? Like, this is evil, Russia. If anything, I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's three scenarios here that if there was any sanity left in the world, would be going on. Like, number one, we allow both pipelines, right? Or let's just start with the most sane one. The most sane one would be Alberta gets the pipeline, Russia doesn't. That would be the most sane one. The next most sane one would be we both get the pipeline. And then the next most sane, or sorry, the least, the next option would be nobody gets a pipeline, right? But the reality is that we're not doing the most sane one. The most sane one would be Alberta gets it, Russia doesn't, if they actually believe what they believe. Now, the next most sane one would be if they actually believe what they believe, is nobody gets a pipeline. But that's not what they're doing. They're doing the one that makes the least amount of sense. Because again, if pipelines are okay, why not Keystone? Why not? Doesn't make any sense, right? So at the end of the day, this isn't just entirely from a cult-like point of view, right? It is entirely a cult-like point of view, and people say, "Oh, how did they get away with this stuff?" Well, nobody tells them about this stuff. How many people who don't support Keystone are aware of this stuff? How many people who don't support Keystone are aware of this? Maybe 1%. So they get away with it because they rely on how ignorant the average person is. Like, it's like how they get away with everything, basically. But they get away with it because they rely on just how ignorant and stupid the average person is. So, you know, I appreciate Jason Kenney bringing this stuff up, but he really should be doing more on this stuff, right? He really should be doing more. And it's just hilarious to see, it's just hilarious to see these leftists defending this stuff. Like, it's just hilarious how, like, Jason Kenney could say the sky is blue. Jason Kenney could say, humans need oxygen to survive, And I guarantee you there'd be people in the comments section finding some reason to rip on them. It's like, you guys are the craziest idiots I have ever seen. Right? So anyway, again, just wanted to bring that up. So again, if you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I say, check out those links and stay tuned for more.